Hello, everyone. Time for another read aloud. Please follow along if you're reading with me. We'll get through this very quickly because we only got 5 minutes to do it. You know how it goes. How did scientists learn about genes? In the case of twins with different hair color and eye color, it is an interesting genetic event. It can help people understand how parents' genes influence trait variations in their children. How do scientists know that genes are on chromosomes? How do they know that traits are passed down from one generation to another? The answer is that people's understanding today comes from a long history of scientific investigation. Scientists have built on discoveries of those scientists who came before them. Learning more about genes. In the 1880s, scientists observed structures that looked like threads inside of the nucleus of a cell. While they were not sure of the function of the structure served, they named these parts of the cell chromosomes. In 1903, Walter Sutton, a graduate student at Columbia University, thought that the chromosomes might be the structure that contained genes. Thomas Hunt Morgan, a professor working in zoology at Columbia, and his students studied genes in fruit flies. In 1911, they discovered that genes seemed to be fixed in a certain place along chromosomes. Their work supported Sutton's idea. Scientists then understood that genes were on chromosomes, and chromosomes were made of protein and DNA. You know that DNA is what carries the instructions for the traits an organism will have. In the 1920s and 1930s, scientists thought DNA was a simple molecule that could not be a major part of heredity. So, the question, what are genes, was not completely answered. Scientists still wanted to know where genes were located and how they functioned. In 1943, Oswald Avery discovered that when he injected DNA from a certain disease carrying bacteria into a harmless bacteria, it transformed the bacteria into a disease producing bacteria. This led Avery to believe that DNA gave new traits to the bacteria when it was injected. Scientists then knew that DNA was the only substance capable of storing the information needed to create a living being. We now know that during sexual reproduction, the offspring inherits half of their chromosomes, 23, from each of their parents. So, who first studied patterns in inheritance? Humans who lived thousands of years ago noticed that traits seemed to run in families. Tall parents often had children who grew up to be tall, and hair color and eye color also seemed to be passed from, from parent to child. But some traits were harder to explain. Sometimes traits seem to skip generations. Some children resemble their grandparents and even their parents. Sorry, their grandparents more than their parents. Until the mid 1800s, most ideas of heredity came from people's observations about themselves and the organisms around them. That is when Gregor Mendel, a monk living in Austria, decided to do experiments to figure out how traits were passed on. Mendel loved animals, but having grown up on a farm, he was also interested in plants. The garden around the monastery provided many types of plants. As Mendel observed the gardens, he noticed the new plants also almost always looked like the parent plants. However, sometimes a plant would not look like the parent plants. He wondered how this could happen, so he decided to conduct experiments to determine how traits were passed from parent to offspring. From pea plants to heredity. Mendel decided to use the Montessori gardens to conduct his experiments. He knew that he had to have a plant that had traits that could be easily observed. He also needed a plant that could be grown in large numbers. He decided to use a common pea plant. Mendel spent an entire year breeding plants before he began his experiment. Mendel spent the year before he began his experiment determining which traits he would study. Mendel discovered four traits that were easily observable: flower color, either purple or white; seed color, either yellow or green; seed shape, either round or dented; plant height, either tall or short. In class, you learned that flowering plants produce sexually. Sexual reproduction requires both male and female parts, and many plants have both. But for the plant reproduction, pollen moves from the stamen, the male part, to the pistil, the female part. Okay, looks like I'm running out of time. Just got my notification at the bottom. You got like two more paragraphs. You can absolutely do this. No problem. I hope this got you started. You've got this.